Good morning, everyone. Can you see the screen share and hear me clearly? Okay, thanks for the feedback. Okay, welcome to lectures on topic 1.10 and 1.11. So on the 22nd of June, we have reached until the contractual provisions in relation to progress payment. That is under your PAM is related to clause 30. So if you're talking about payment, interim payment, you go to clause 30. When talking about final account, also you go to clause 30. But currently, this topic is on interim payment. If you talk about final account, then these are final account topics to look into. Then after that, you're talking about final certificate. There's another area is final certificate. Final account and final certificate are two different entities. Please be careful. So with this payment, there's another item here need to be linked. That is the interest. These are the new addition. Last time under the earlier version of your PAM, they don't have. So now all these are included already. PAM 2006 and 20 they include already. Earlier, and such item is not in the contract. So we'll proceed from here. So first of all, we need to cover the issues related to interim payment. So you need to understand the basic concept. So the first thing is you look at the clause 30.1 is on the process and the meaning of interim payment. So the interim payment, this concept is very important for you to understand. So interim payment will be applicable during the whole construction phase. Okay, so how is it done? So this one is construction phase. Under this situation, there will be monthly as dictated in the appendix. Okay, so this is number one. And then after the CPC issue, after the CPC issued, interim payment is at the discretion of the. So this is a very important point. So interim payment certificate, payment to the contractor during the whole construction phase. Monthly as dictated independent. It means that each time you have a schedule to do your claim and all these things in a monthly interval. But after the CPC issued, interim payment to be prepared, and you can submit up to the CPC because the project is under maintenance. Okay, so you may have a final account and then the money are coming out. Whether the certificate will be produced or not is no more monthly. It will be at the discretion of the architect. This is a very important point. You need to understand. If not, you're going to have problem. So interim payment is determined by contractual provision and the common law. So currently we focus more towards the contractual provision. Later on, if there's a problem, then we may go out to the common law to get it resolved, or the statutory provision to get it resolved. Okay. So what is the purpose of the interim payment? It's a mechanism to confirm an installment of money that is due to the contractor. So this one, it means that after the architect have, QS and architect have evaluated and issue a certificate, then that certificate, there is a date for the employer to honor the payment. That payment will tie back to the certificate. It's a mechanism for confirming an installment of money is due to the contractor. Without this certificate, the contractor cannot get the money out from the work. So it's very important under PAM or under JKR or under CIDB or under feeding or your traditional type of procurement. This is a very important part. You can only get paid when the architect produces the certificate. If there is no certificate, then there's no mechanism to transfer the money from the employer to the contractor. And then the contractor have no mechanism to pay to the NSCs and so on. Okay, so whatever method that is in your contract, remember the certificate is only temporary, as the amount is evaluated at the monthly interval are temporarily correct. If there's any error to be correct due to certain mistake, then there is a mechanism on how to correct it that we're going to study later. So even though it's certified by the architect, it doesn't mean the work is 100%. It doesn't mean the quality, the workmanship is 100% accepted. It's a temporary acceptance until the final certificate or the CPCs are issued. So anything that is included in the certificate, subject to later certification adjustment. This is something for you to think about, which is very common in the construction industry. It is only the final certificate conclusive. That's what I say. This is the last one is conclusive. The rest are interim. But even this conclusive is only conclusive in the amount, but not in the quality. This is something we are going to study further later. As a result, so the whole concept is the employer after the certification must pay to the contractor within the stated time. And that stated time, you have to look into your appendix. Okay, so the stated time here will be shown here. In this case, I mentioned to you, you have to go back to the appendix. When to pay. Okay, so this is under the period of honoring. See? So this is the period of honoring. If non-stated is 21 days. If something stated here, let's say 45 days, then the payment period will be 45 days of the certificate. They may put there 60 days. Then the contractor will only get the payment from the employer within 60 days from the certificate. The word used is usually within. So that means that it can be after the certificate date, the next day the employer can release. or the employer will take the very last day to release. Now that is very important within the date the days as stated here. Okay. If the employer fail to pay within the stated duration, it amounts to a breach of contract. Okay. And also, I did mention to you, all certificates are temporary. Any certificate that is issued by the architect is always reviewable by the arbitrator or by the court. So this is the very important concept on certificate. So the meaning of certificate, it means that at end of each month, it shows that the contractor has met the contractual obligation. That means that the work or the material on site that is payable is registered in the interim certificate and then evaluated already, issued the certificate, then it triggers the transfer of the money from the employer to the contractor. So this is the key point that is expressed above. When to pay is appendix. It will have to refer to appendix. Either 21 days is nothing written, or 30 days, 40 days, 50 days, depending on how the contract is being drafted. So that figure can be changed depending on the tender documents that you compile. So now, under the clause 31, architect is obligated to issue interim certificate. When to do it? I did mention to you earlier when to do it. Okay. So first of all, must receive contractor's application. Must, the word is must, at the correct time. Details and particulars. So the first thing, the thing is, architect cannot do anything if contractor didn't submit. So this is one. So, and also receive the evaluation from the QS. So that means there are two parties under the PAM. There are two parties to do it. Contractor to submit, QS to evaluate. Okay. So once it is done, then only the architect will issue the interim certificate and a copy to the employer or to the contractor within 21 days from the receipt of the contractor's application. If the contractor apply, submit their claim on, let's say, it's the 1st June 2021, the certificate must be issued to the contractor within 21 days. It means the latest date to issue the interim payment certificate is 22nd June 2021. That's what it means. So this is very important, is for the QS and the architect to share this 21 days. Usually architect will take more days to do the evaluation, and then the architect may take 1 or 2 days to check through, then produce the certificate. And the copy to employer and a copy to the contractor. Then this certificate must be paid by the, I use the word, must be paid by the employer within the honoring period. The honoring period is at the appendix. So failure by the contractor to submit application. What does it mean? If contractor fail to submit, it means the contractor waive his contractual rights for interim payment. What does it mean here? It means that that particular month, it means here, it doesn't mean for the whole duration of the contract. It means that waive the right of payment for that particular month. So be clear, this waive his contractual right for interim pay doesn't mean oh, this project you cannot claim money at the end of the day you get paid only. It's not true. It's that particular month. That particular month you didn't submit, no certificate to be produced, no certificate produced, no money can be transferred. Next. So what must a contractor do? Submit claim with details and particulars. That is the most important. So the details and particulars will be discussed during the initial meeting. I did mention to you, a very initial meeting, that is the kick-off meeting. Usually the kick-off meeting, everybody knows what to do for interim submission particulars. Maybe how many copies, what are the details need to be there, calculation, computation, and support maybe by vouchers and all this. These are the details. They were discussed in the interim, so-called the kickoff meeting. Then the contractor and everybody is aware what needs to be done. The consultants are there, employers are there, and also the contractors, subcontractors are all there. So the details, everybody knows. Then only architect can only process, and the QSN can only process the interim payment. So important principle, why I mentioned to you, you need the interim certificate. It is because of this legal principle. The issue of an interim certificate to the contractor does not itself entitle him to payment. It doesn't mean that the interim certificate issued already, oh, can you give me the money? No. It is a condition precedent to payment. Without a certificate, you will never get the payment. But when to receive the payment, it's not immediately after the certificate. It must be within the honoring period. So please understand this concept of honoring period. The certificate will be issued if the contractor has submitted all the details. Okay, the QS and the architect will ensure the interim certificate will be issued within 21 days, as stated here. But then the contractor cannot get the money immediately. The contractor have to wait for the honoring. It's up to the employer to pay you the next day after the interim certificate date, or to wait until the very last day of the expiry of the period of honoring. More often than not, I can assure you, employer will keep the money until the very last day to pay to the contractor. Some helpful employer will release the money earlier. It's up to the discretion of the employer. There is nothing to bind them, not to after the certificate issue, can you pay me the next day? Contractually, the contractor cannot force the employer to pay early. As long as the contractor receives the money within the honoring period. Understand the concept of within the honoring period. We say within 30 days, the employer can pay you the first day or the 29.999 days. That's it already. The employer have complied with the contractual provision. So next thing we are talking about error correction. More often than not, contractor submissionary, if there's any error, the architect usually will not adjust the error immediately unless, I use the term, correction of any error, discrepancies on modify any current. The word here, important point is any current. That means the current one. You can do it immediately for clerical, typo, and computational error. These three, you can do it immediately. Okay, so any other error will be corrected in the subsequent certificate. Please understand this concept. Any other error than clerical, computational, or typo must be corrected subsequent certificate, not the current certificate. The keyword here is subsequent certificate or the later certificate. See the difference? This one is current. This one is later or subsequent. Okay. So what does the certificate means? It means a approximate value of the work done. That's all. Okay. So it means that the figure is temporary. It shows that only is approximate of the value of the work done. Okay. Yeah. So at clause 30.2, it will tell you why the certificate is adjustable. So if there's any error, it will be done by the subsequent certificate, as the certificate is allowed to make fresh appraisal of the work each time the certificate is processed. Okay. So this is the meaning of adjustment at the subsequent certification. The figure can revise upwards or downwards for that error. Not doesn't mean there is no money, okay? Because for that particular error, it can reverse up or down to correct it. But then the contractor have already additional work. So with this additional work, then there will be a net positive. It doesn't mean here, by reducing become negative, then you ask the money from the contractor. Very rare such thing will happen unless you make a very gross error. Usually, the revision, if it is upward, the contractor will get more money. If the revision for the error is downward, the contractor will get less money because there is a work done, there is a positive, reducing will be negative. So that is how the interim certificate are adjusted. So the honoring period, as I say, is always reflected in the appendix. From here you can see the appendix stated very clearly, if non-stated is 21 days from the date of the certificate. If anything here takes over. Okay. So it shall be computed from the date of interim certificate issued by the architect to the contractor and the employer. So this is a very important point, is the date of the certificate and not the so-called date of the contractor submission. Please be careful between the two dates. First of all, the contractor must submit at the end of each month. That is the date of the contractor submission. But the honoring period is not on the date of the contractor submission. It's the date of the architect's certificate. The architect certificate, usually they will process after the date of contractor submission within 21 days. Because architect and the QS need around 21 days to process the paperwork. So it can be issued earlier than 21 days. It's up to the architect. But the maximum is 21 days. If they fail to do it within 21 days, it means architect is in breach of contract. No, sorry. Architect is negligent. And with this negligence, employer is in the breach of contract. Because why I say architect cannot be breach of contract here is this. Architect have no contractual relationship with the contractor. It's only the employer. Architect is representing the employer to do all the admin and other works. I hope we are clear. So if architect fail to do it, indirectly it means that the employer is in breach of contract. So failure to pay by the employer is a breach of contract. So what can the contractor do if such a thing happen? These are very important points. Please remember them. So then this will be the main thing that you have to take back if PEM is used for your future working life. Okay. So these are the things will be operational almost every time you evaluate a certification. And if the employer didn't pay, so these are the things that can happen. But please remember, the contractor will invoke only one of these at a time, although the rights are all here. Okay, so the contractor will invoke one at a time. So failure to pay, then to determine this is a very severe. Number one, then the contractor can ask for interest under clause 30.71, right to interest charge. Number two. Number three, that means to postpone the completion. Number three, under clause 30.7. And number four, may even invoke the education provision. So these are the four things that can happen if employer fail to pay. More often than not, the contractor will invoke point number 2 and point number 4. Usually these are the usual one, action to be taken. Okay, if these two cannot work already, then they will go to number 4. Number 1 is the very last thing the contractor would do for obvious reason, to maintain future harmony with the employer. So once you activated determination or go to SIPA, I believe the friendship is going to be over. Okay, with 2 and 3, the friendship can still maintain. Clear? So contractor entitlement subject to employer contractor rights to deduction. So it doesn't mean that the full amount or your work done, you get paid. You have to be subject to deduction. For example, deduction usually will happen, will be your, such as, if you want, temporary deduction here will be retention sum. Okay, so this one is okay. So there's temporary reduction. And number 2, if you are under the LD, liquid damages, then there's another deduction. And number 3, set off. So these are the typical deduction you can see in a certificate. But be careful. I will explain further. This deduction is reflected directly in the certificate. In the interim. So please be careful. Retention sum is something to be deducted within the interim certificate. But this LD and set off, these two, I highlight in a different color. Blue. The deduction will be reflected in the amount due to the contractor less the amount for LD or set off. So I explained this. LD and set off, there will be deduction, but it will be reflected in the amount due to the contractor. This amount due is reflected in the certificate issued by the architect. Then the contractor will receive, let's say here amount due, let's say, okay, RM 500,000. Okay, then the contractor won't get 500,000 because I did mention if there is no other thing, then the employer must pay 500,000. If there is a deduction, the contractor less amount LD and set off. Let's say LD here is 100K. And then there is a set off. Let's say it's 200K. Okay, so now your certificate got 500K. This is the amount shown in the certificate prepared by the architect. Then you have your LD 100K and set off 200K. What the actual amount received? What the actual amount received by the contractor is RM 200K. So I believe you need to understand this important concept again. The deduction for the retention sum is in the contractual clause to be reflected in the interim certificate. The other item, for example, LD set off, there's another thing, interest, is not surfaced here. If there's any interest to be charged to the contractor, it's to be deducted by this mechanism. It's not reflected in the certificate. You cannot do that. So if you are QS, this is very important for QS. You don't simply go and deduct it here. You just put the amount entitled and then ask the employer. You write a separate letter to the employer saying that, oh, you can set off how many thousand, and then the LD already imposed the project is delayed how many thousand. Then it's for the employer. Whether want to deduct it from here or not, it's up to the employer. If the employer want to deduct, this is the balance amount due to the contractor. It's nothing to do with the consultants. It is a private deduction. I hope you are very clear. This is a very important principle for those, if you are going to work, this is the very powerful concept that you need to remember. Okay, so now on set off, employer to set off, what are the situations that employer can set off? Is clause 30.4. So 30.4 says that only this item is allowed the employer to do the set off. Outside this item, please don't do it. It's not correct contractually. So it must be reflected in your clause 2.4, 4.4, and so on. So you go back here. You go to the clause 2.4, 4.4, and so on. So what does it mean? I won't be going to all, just to show it to you. Okay. So 2.4, if contractor fail to comply, there you can see here clause 30.4. See? Set off employer under clause 30.4. Then 4.4. Okay. Fees levied, then set off under clause 30.4. Are you clear? So these are the provisions that tells you how they are linked together. So I hope you understand. If you memorize, it's impossible for you to do well in your PPP III. You must know the link, where to hunt for it. So these are the techniques of how to get it done. Okay. So same case here. 5.1. See here, set off. So these are the areas will tell you. These are the areas that you can do the deduction directly from. Can see here 5.1 or this. I just show you just now. No? So you just hunt through, you will get all these answers there. Okay. So how to do the set off? Cannot simply set off. The employer need to give notice before the deduction. Usually before the deduction, you must give 28 days earlier notice. Then you deduct. Okay. So not later than 28 days before you deduct. Don't simply immediately certificate come out, you deduct. You tell them, the contractor, I'm going to deduct already. Okay. So earlier than this. Any set off by the employer recover from the contractor. So this is what I mean earlier. You get it from the contractor directly from the certificate amount, minus. Okay. Or from the any money due. This is from the certificate. If this certificate after the set off is not enough, it will become as a debt. So if the certificate, just now let's say is only 300,000, 300K, then you have LD 100K, set off 200K, then what is the balance to the contractor? 0. So the contractor get no money. Okay. If the payment for that one is 100,000 and then this LD is 100,000, set off 200,000, it means that the contractor is owing the employer 200,000. So then it becomes a debt. So the employer can get back the money from, this is the best way, amount due. That means from the certificate. Okay. So the next one will be from the performance bond. So these are the areas, the things that the employer can use just in case that the money is not sufficient for the set off. The last one to do will be ask the lawyer to send a nice letter okay, to the contractor. That is called a debt. So employer got 3 way, but usual way is this one. This is the usual way, amount due. This is the amount due here, amount due. Okay, see the word here, amount due. This is the usual way that the employer will do the deduction. What happens if the contractor not agree? If contractor not agree, then what action to take? So contractor must be within 21 days stating the reasons. So employer, as I say, need to inform, isn't it? So the employer will inform the contractor, but not 28 days before they do the deduction. So once the employer send a letter to the contractor, so from that date of the employer's letter, the contractor can have to accept it, or within 21 days of the employer's letter dated is for the contractor to agree or disagree. So I hope you are clear. I repeat one more time. So this deduction, the notice, see, the must use the employer's letterhead. Do you know why? Because this deduction is dealing in money matter. It's nothing to do with the architect. Architect only the middleman to help out the paperwork. So this one must be from the letterhead, must be from the employer. Okay. Or the employer have written a letter to the contractor saying that architect will be representing or delegate that power to the architect to issue this letter. If not, it must be from the employer letterhead. So this is a very important concept again. Don't think that architect will do everything for the employer. It can do, but on this matter, there are few matters, it must be from the employer's letterhead. And this is one of them. When you do deduction, when you do determination, all this must be from the employer's letterhead. Others, the architect can do within the PAM. Is allowed the architect or the QS to do the paperwork on behalf of the employer. So this is a very important subject matter. Okay, it's your future rice bowl. This is what you need to understand. And don't just simply architect issue everything. You are in trouble because dealing with money matters. Employer letterhead have to come in already because it's a very serious matter because it will lead to court case and so on. So if contractor disagree, so within 21 days, I need to state out the reason for the disagreement. If cannot agree, then the employer, if not agreeable to the contractor's reasoning, then this one will be referred to adjudication. So this is a very interesting point here. When there is a dispute on this matter set off, the adjudication under the contract, the clause 36, must be invoked to resolve this dispute. In other situation, any dispute, you can go for adjudication, mediation, arbitration within the contract. You can do it. But for this one, really specifically stated out, you must go for adjudication here. No other method first if there's a dispute. Are you clear? So this is a very special situation. On set off is adjudication. And what is adjudication here is not just CIPA, it's your contractual adjudication under clause 36. You need a adjudicator under the contract, not the adjudicator under your CIPA. Although the name is the same, the activities that they are doing are slightly different. Okay, so please be careful. Don't misunderstand this point here. It's a very important point. So I repeat, set off, if anything disputed, cannot resolve it in 21 days by the contractor submission, and also within the 21 days, the employer not agreeable, then you can refer to the adjudication already. Okay, if there is no dispute, then employer can do the deduction. So this is the important point. So if there's a dispute, employer shall not do the set off until the adjudicator have made the decision. So I hope we are clear on this point. Okay, then we move on. Clause 30.4 already stated to you. Now there's another point for the employer need to do. In order to deduct, employer to inform not only the amount plus the reasons for the deduction. So this is something the employer need to do. Cannot simply deduct the amount. Okay, so you must give reason in writing and with reason. So that means it's not saying that orally or what, is in writing and then with reason. Then only you can do the deduction. Okay, so here stated under the QB, Gifford versus Selling Court, says that employer can do to give the reduction under this environment. The employer has a periodic opportunity to state the reason. If the contractor says, how come there is no reason? No problem. Then they can restate the reason for deduction. Okay, in the interim certificate, what are the things to be deducted? Okay, but must make sure of the ground for deduction, the valid reasons for deduction. If not, the reduction will be invalid. So this is supported by the case law. So any set of computation is taken into consideration, and we contract owes a debt. Yeah, this is what I mean just now. If a debt, then the when to pay, it will be 21 days after receiving that so-called note. So if it fail to pay on the debt, then the employer got the right to charge for interest. That's how the interest so-called item is appearing. Contractor owes a debt. That means the money is not sufficient and then the contractor didn't pay back. So this is how the interest computation by the employer commence already. After the 21 days of the receipt of the notification, and there is no challenge by the contractor, it starts already. So how to compute? Maybank base lending rate BLR plus 1%. Okay, so how long to compute? Payable by the contract until the date the payment is made. Okay, so until the date payment is made, then you know the duration. Okay, so this is how you do the deduction on the set off. So clause 30.5.6 related to retention money. So this is a very important area, the retention money I mentioned to you earlier. This can be reflected in the interim certificate. So what is the purpose of retention money? Is to ensure that the contractor fulfill their contractual obligation and do their work properly. If not, this money will be used to do the repair of the defective work and so on. Okay, so it's on defective work and non-performance. So these two items, please be careful. You cannot simply use your retention sum for other things. It must be on defective work or non-performance. Okay, so you cannot use a retention sum, go and buy so-called dinner for your employee. Okay, so it's not here. It's defective work or non-performance by the contractor. That is the money that you can use to get this rectified. Other than these two, please be careful. The contractor can come after the employer. These two clauses governs the time when to get back the retention money. Okay, so on the release of the retention money, you have to refer to clause 30.5 and clause 30.6. So clause 30.5 is this. The money that is retained, you will get it released as per reflected in the appendix. Okay, so more often than not, so please remember was revised by the drafter of PAM 2018. So this is important. PAM 2018 changed this concept slightly. Okay, let me show it to you. Clause 30.2. See here? So there is a change already. They changed this clause slightly. Why? You see here in the appendix. Okay, so you have to go to the appendix. What does the appendix tells you? See here? So percentage of the certified retained. This is the retention sum. See here the clause 30.5. Percentage of certified value retained if non-stated is 5% of the work executed and material on site. Okay, so subject to the limit of this is no more. Are you clear now? Subject to the limit last time in your PAM 2006 is the work done deduct 10% of the work executed up to a maximum of 5% of the contract sum. It's no more. Now it's 5% of the value of the work done flat throughout your work done. Clear? So please remember this. If you are to handle your PAM 206, this one 10% and 5% applicable. If you have PAM 2008, you only deduct 5% of the work done or the 5% of the work done plus material on site that are legally to be there. Then you do your computation for your certificate. All the time 5%. There is no such thing as 10% up to a limit of 5%. Repeat. PAM 2008 is 5% flat throughout. PAM 2006 will be 10% of the work done up to a maximum of 5% of the contract sum. Okay, so revise PAM 2016. So before practical completion, this one situation, a special situation. If the employer were to take back partially, okay, there is partial possession by the employer, which may happen. Then how to do the adjustment? So there will be a partial release of the retention sum. Partial possession, partial release. Okay. So which clause operational is clause 16.1 and 21.13 or NSA's early finalization of the account. So these are the situations that the partial release of retention clause operational. Okay, so this can happen if there's a partial possession or under the clause 16.1D, 21.3, or early payment to tidy up the NSAs. That means the issue of the penultimate certificate. Early final payment made to the NSAs. What does it mean? It means this part, okay? This is equals to penultimate to the NSCs. This is what it means. So this is important. Huh? So penultimate certificate issued to NSCs. So only in PEM, you will find that this penultimate certificate is final certificate to the NSCs. In other clause, penultimate means a second last certificate. Please remember the difference. In PEM 2018, penultimate certificate means final certificate, no, sorry, final, the final payment certificate to the NSCs, okay? But in other situation or other context, penultimate certificate means second last certificate for that contract. Please differentiate between the two. So if this is already released, then the retention sum will be reduced accordingly. Okay. So for example, if the original retention sum for the NSAs by the main contractor is 100,000, if you were to release this item, let's say 10,000, then the revised retention sum for that project now becomes 90,000. That is what they try to mean here. So these are the rules, 30.6 on how to release the retention sum. Okay, so it's very important. Employer is only fiduciary duty. So when employee retain the retention sum, the employer role is only fiduciary role. That means holding the money as a safety for the contractor. Okay, so it's something like a trust money in the employer's hand. That means for safekeeping by the employer. Okay, so what does it mean? It means that employer have no obligation to invest the retention sum. So the meaning here is this, a very important meaning. If there is no obligation to invest a retention sum, then there is no obligation for the contractor to ask for interest money over the retention sum. Clear? So please remember the principle of fiduciary here is acting as a trustee. Just keep your money for safekeeping. And then if the contractor asks, you're keeping my money, can you pay me some interest over that money? The employer say, thank you very much. This is a fiduciary. And then there is no obligation to invest. So no interest payable. Okay. So now, what will happen? Can the contractor get interest out of retention sum? Question. Can a contractor get interest out of retention sum? Answer is possible. If the contractor elect to demand in writing from the employer, it means that the contractor will inform the employer in writing to ask for the retention sum to be transferred to a trust account. That means in the safekeeping of the bank. Okay. So if there is no other problem, employer within 14 days need to transfer that money to the trust account, or we call it the escrow account. So this money to be held by whom? Stakeholders appointed by party making the application. That means the contractor representative. Stakeholder appointed by the party making the application. Who make the application? It is the contractor. Clear? So To be fair, all the paperwork in relation to this application must be borne by the contractor. So if you ask a question, can the contractor gain interest money from the retention? Answer is yes and no. No, if the contractor didn't ask the employer to transfer that retention amount to the trust account or escrow account. Okay, so if the contractor have done that, then that money in the bank will accumulate interest money from the bank. But the accumulation of the interest money, you won't be able to take it out until you get your CPC and also tidy up your maintenance item. That is your CMGD certificate. Then only you get all your money out. If not, the money will be jammed there. To be fair, all the paperwork, contractor must bear the cost. Okay. So employer, as I say, got the right to deduct. I already explained above. What are the things to deduct? Due to the contractor or the NSAs. Okay. So as usual, the deduction will come up with the reason. So now you can see under your PAM 2018, you just cannot simply do deduction without reason. So the reasoning part is incorporated in your PAM. Even the architect to grant extension of time, if there is no extension of time, the architect must come up with the reason. This is the new in 2018. In 2006, no need to give reason. So be careful. Don't simply deduct. Now the reasoning aspect is important already. Okay. So how much to release? One moiety means 50% if the project is completed with the CPC. That means 50% of the amount retained. One moiety means 50%. Don't put one moiety and put half again. It's wrong. Okay. So one moiety means half of the retention sum or 50% retention sum. Please don't write one moiety half again. Some people don't like to write. One moiety half of the retention is wrong. One moiety already half, and then another half it become 1/4. And then how about the second half? This is the first half. Second half, when all the defects are remedied. So that means you have to get your CMGD. Architect issue the CMGD. That is the date that you apply for your second half to be released. So okay, we stop here for 5 minutes break. I hope you are very clear. I'm going a little bit slow here because it's very important for your working life. So continue. So 10.02 a.m. So 10:02 a.m. I will continue. So in the meantime, for those who haven't scanned, can you scan or not? Those got problems in your QR code scanning, please let me know if I will update all this. Okay. Can you see the screen? Yeah, anyone can provide feedback? Can you see the screen? Okay, thanks for your feedback. Yeah, I continue from here. So after the release of the retention, then the architect need to issue certificate to release it. So the contractor cannot call up the architect, please give me the retention money. No, the contractor need to apply, and then the architect will issue the certificate. And then how to pay? As usual, the certificate issued already, then within the days as stated in the appendix, the employer will release that money. So clause 30.7 is on suspension. Okay, so when contractor invoke this, just now I mentioned to you, if the contractor didn't receive their money from the employer within the honoring period, then the contractor may invoke this clause 30.7. That is suspension. So what does it mean here? Without prejudice. So this is a very important legal concept again. The meaning of without prejudice. It means this: even though the contractor got the right to determine if such thing happened, but the contractor didn't invoke this particular section, then there are other rights that the contractor can take. This is called without prejudice, because the contractor is allowed to invoke clause 26 if there is no payment also. So here you always say without prejudice. That means without affecting my other rights. For example, clause 26 plus others. Then this is what the contractor can do. What does it mean here? If the employer fail or neglect to pay the contractor the amount due as shown in the certificate, as usual, less. So this is wrong already. Less any amount. So this is wrong, definitely wrong. Please, sorry about that. Why this is wrong? As I say, this cannot be reflected in the certificate. This must be reflected in the direct deduction. Okay. So if employer fail to pay the contractor the amount due to the contractor as shown in the payment certificate, then less liquidated damages. Sorry. Employers can do that. Employers can do that. Mistaken. Okay. So that's why I say it's a direct deduction. Employer can do the direct deduction, but architect and the QS cannot surface this in their certificate. Okay. So that is the deduction allowed to be made under the contract. Direct deduction from the payment due. And if the employer continue for the 14 days by hand or register post. So this is a very important procedural requirement. If it's contract that say by hand, you must deliver by hand. If the contract document state is by register post, you must send it by register post. You don't go and send it by Grab. Go and send it by whatever so-called courier service. Register post means our Malaysian post office, the register post there. If you don't use a register post, then your notification is wrong. And then your claim for this type of things is defective. So look at the contract provision. If we say by hand, then you need to send by hand from the company representative. Or by register post. It means the post office that is doing it, not by DHL, not by Kangaroo or whatever things. Okay? Or by Grab or Lala Move and all these things. Sorry, this is not register post. Okay? So it must be the post office to do it. Stating the amount is not paid within 14 days, then the contractor. So these are the duration. So this one is two steps. In order to invoke clause 30.7, there are two steps involved. First step is to make sure you notify the employer on the default in payment. First letter, 14 days for the employer to comply. And after that, if the payment is not made within the 14 days, then another letter by hand or by register post. Then forthwith suspend the execution of the work until such thing is paid. So this is important. Forthwith suspend. After your second letter, the first letter after the expiry of the payment certificate to be honored, you send one letter. So let's say the certificate ends at 1st July 2021. So the contractor can on the 2nd July send a letter to demand the employer to honor the payment, giving the employer 14 days. Okay. So if the employer didn't honor within the 14 days, that means 2nd July you send your letter, that means giving the employer until 2nd plus 14, 16 July, the employer didn't pay. Then on the 17th July, you send another letter to the employer, giving the employer another time to honor. If that letter, you give a certain grace period, the employer didn't honor, then with that letter, in theory, you can immediately suspend your job. Forthwith means immediately suspend the job until the payment is made. Okay, so on one good reason that your carrying out of this action cannot be done unreasonably or vexatiously. That means you're doing something with a hidden agenda. No, you must do it with the so-called genuine or in good faith. This is how it is done. So please draw out the duration. From here, you can be able to draw the duration. You putting the date there. It's easy to understand. If no, you read here 14 days and 14 days. It's very difficult to understand. Put the date there, then you can understand them better. That is how the suspension works. I cannot immediately suspend. Okay, so that is clause 30.7. Then under the clause 30.8, so if the consultants were to withdraw the supervision, what will happen? Architect or the consultant inform the contractor that they are withdrawing the supervision for the work. So no people supervise the work. Then how? So this is a ground for the contractor to suspend immediately. The reason is very simple. If there is no architect at the project site to issue instruction, all your works carried out is going to be problem. Okay, so this is another area. 30.8 is a suspension, not from the money. It's from the architect or the consultant already abandon the project site. Then you can suspend immediately. So contractor can suspend one on payment, one due to the consultant consultants not available at the project site. Until the employer get a new consultant, then work will continue. Because there is already at the project site. Okay. So clause 30.9, contractor suspend the work under 30.8, 30.9, 30.7 and 30.8. What does it mean? It means that once you suspend the work already, clause 30.9 will tell you how to extend or whatever with your insurance or discuss with the insurance company to cover for such so-called suspension. Okay, so work during the period of suspension, the insurance coverage could be so-called temporary withhold. If you want to continue, then you let the insurance company aware so that the insurance company will know when is the suspension. The insurance is for the active work, and then what other insurance could be applicable during the suspension. Okay, because the insurance may have a different so-called requirement on the suspension. Okay, once the suspension period over already, then you need to inform the insurance again for the extension of time, because the suspension duration, the consultants or the employer need to give you the extension of time and how much the additional premium required employer will have to pay. So please remember, clause 30.9 is to provide insurance coverage during the suspension or partial provision for the suspension. Okay. So there is a separate cessation insurance cover, a special cessation cover, so that the insurance company will come in. So after the over already, then the insurance duration will be extended. So the separation cessation insurance cover need to be paid, plus extension of the insurance premium need to be paid. Who pay for all these things? The employer will have to pay, because shall be added to the contract sum. It means the employer is responsible. Shall be added to the contract sum. That means you get the net positive VO. Then we go on to the NSCs, subcontract. So the same principle apply. See, main contract applicable to your NSCs. Okay, equally applicable, apply equally to your NSCs. So under the NSCs, you have this clause 27.5. So it states that architect shall direct the contractor as the total amount of work done. So this is what usually the architect, when they issue the interim certificate to the main contractor, they will have another computation to the NSCs. So this is for the contractor to pay the NSCs after 7 days of receiving the money. So the NSCs will receive the money from the main contractor after 7 days. When the contractor receive the money from the employer, that means plus another 7 days. This is what he tried to say. Okay. Yeah. So the NSCs will know how much they are getting. Clause 30.13. This is a penultimate certificate. It is I already expressed earlier that if the employer or the consultants are willing to release the NSCs earlier, then this is a special certificate produced by the consultant. Okay, so to release the retention sum plus other money that is due. That is under the clause 30.1. So usually It is done after the making goods of the defects by the main contractor and the NSCs. Okay, so this is under the clause 30.13, giving the rights of the architect to prepare a penultimate certificate. I can assure you this is quite rare in the industry because of very simple reason. If what happens if the NSCs fail to carry out their so-called obligation under the defects liability period and so on. So if you ask the penultimate certificate to be issued after the CMGD, there's a possibility it will be done. But the penultimate certificate to be issued before the CMGD is going to be very, very difficult. I repeat, penultimate certificate to be issued after the CMGD is not so problematic because all the defects are already repaired. Penultimate certificate to be issued before CMGD or even before CPC, it is very, very difficult for the architect to do it. So please remember that. Because if they were to do that before the CPC or before CMGD, there is a possibility that the defects or all the things are not being remedied by the NSCs. And NSCs are specialists. No other people can do it, that specialist job, so easily. So be careful. That is the reason why this certificate is usually very, very rarely issued. So what is the impact if the NSCs fail to be paid by the main contractor? In the event the main contractor failed to pay the NSCs within the period in the contract as stated. Okay, so there is a possibility for direct payment. I use the word there's a possibility. Okay, so they can ask for direct payment from the employer. Okay, so here is provided under the clause 26 of the PEM. Architect at any time before the final certificate. Once the final certificate is issued, that means the project is already to the architect. Is already finished already. That means that the architect cannot do any other paperwork already. Once the final certificate is issued, the architect power to handle the project is already gone. Yeah. So if that thing happened, then before the final certificate, if the contractor didn't pay the NSCs, then the NSCs will write a letter to the architect, CC to the employer, saying that the contractor didn't pay. And then the architect will ask the main contractor to show proof that whatever claim payable to the NSCs are paid. This is the reason. Okay, so contractor to furnish all the proof that the NSCs work and payment is already honored. So this is the meaning here. So please be careful. It's not so straightforward. It means this, that if the NSCs didn't receive payment, the NSCs will write to the employer and to the architect. And then the architect will ask the contractors, because NSCs didn't get paid, please tell me, show to me that you have paid the NSCs, because the architect need to find proof before they can do the direct payment if they want to. So this is the procedures. So once they write the letter to the employer architect, architect will write another letter to the contractor telling that contractor show proof that you have paid the NSCs. If it's proven, then case closed. If it's not paid, then architect, okay, may prepare a certificate, a separate certificate to pay the NSCs directly. This is what it means. And this certificate is at the discretion of the employer. Even though you appeal for direct payment, if the employer don't do direct payment, you cannot force the employer to do direct payment. This is an option given to the employer, the architect, to issue a separate certificate. If the architect don't issue a separate certificate, then you cannot get the money. The NSAs cannot get that money directly. You still have to wait for the contractor to pay. If they didn't pay, then the other contractual provisions between the contractor and the NSAs will take over. Whether they got the right to suspend, they got the right to interest, they got the right to determine, or they got the right to invoke CPA will takes over. So all depending on the contract between the main contractor and the NSAs. I hope we are clear on this point. So what are the steps to be carried out if the NSAs want to ask for direct payment, failure to pay by the main contractor? So these are the steps to be taken by the NSAs. Okay, make the official complaint to the architect. Number one. Okay, and then the architect will ask the main contractor to show proof. Okay, so if the main contractor cannot respond properly or cannot show proof that they have paid the NSAs, then the architect for the project may issue a certificate for direct payment to the subcontractor. The word is may. May means discretionary. May, not shall. Shall means mandatory. Okay, so with that certificate done, then the contractor will be subject to the direct deduction from the employer. So the money will be paid to the subcontractors, and then the employer will recover the money by deducting the future amount from the main contractor. That's how the things is carried out. Please remember, this one is one-off, not necessarily once it's a direct payment, it will be always direct payment. No. Remember, the point is one-off, because these are the rules. This above mechanism is employer not obligated to do direct payment. Not obligated, optional. Okay, so it's up to the discretion of the employer. Okay, so the word is may instead of shall. Okay, may is discretionary, shall means must. So this is up to the employer. Okay, so now another one is one-off affair. It means that each time there's such an appeal, then the architect will have start all the paperwork again, and then the employer say okay, then they can do a direct payment. Okay, yeah. So subcontractor must act promptly when seeking this one. Don't delay too long, then only ask for this direct payment. Okay. So contract administrator will adhere to the deadline in making his decision to carry out this discretionary power. This one is discretionary power given to the contract administrator. Okay, so because you need the proof and so on, and then the employer also must act with discretion. So all these are discretionary power given to the architect and the employer to trigger the release of payment directly to the NSAs. Okay, yeah, the discretion can be done as usual. I mentioned to you at any time before the final certificate. So once the final certificate is issued, no such thing can happen again because the architect power is chopped off already. So with that, we come to an end to this so-called section C 1.11. And then we can continue to our next sector. Okay, we'll take a few minutes break before I commence on 1.12. We're taking a 5 minutes break. At 10:32. Okay. So 10:32 we meet again. So there are 7 of you still haven't, is still absent. Here is 9. But there are students have valid reason. That's why I convert them to not counted. Okay. So for valid reason, I will put as non-counted. If not, like for example, these are with non-counted. Okay, they are valid reason. If not, it will be in red color. That means you are absent. I hope you are clear. Mhm. Oh. So very sorry, for the delay. Please, can you upload it now? Your section 1.12 from the Weber. So you can see here this one now 1.12. Okay. So okay, have you all downloaded already 1.12? So sorry for that. Huh? So 1.12 is on change procedures or VO. You're dealing with EO. So all these are practical things that to be done by the QS. As usual, once I highlight in a gray is the general concept or the common law concept. So this is what the first thing that I'll go through is on the common law concept actually. So generally you find that in any construction project, there will be changes. If a construction project without change, I think is something not so correct that is happening because of the nature of the construction activities. First of all, you have a different group of professionals, you have a different group of so-called builders, and different groups of suppliers. So all these will have impact on the project. They are so diversified, and also the workers, machinery, material are also diversified. So it bound to have problems in project implementation. So under your traditional format of your procurement, they allow the project to move on where this variation order, the important point in your PAM, okay, this variation order, they know very well the project got changed already. So under the PAM, specifically put there, if there's a valid variation order, I use the term valid, variation order change request. It does not vitiate the contract. So does not vitiate the existing contract. So this is a very important principle. Valid VO or change order does not vitiate existing contract. Does not vitiate means the existing contract is still valid even though there are additional things to be done or additional or things to be omitted. It means this. Or the original existing contract still runs even though there is such changes. If not, if there is no such clause in the contract like PAM, each time there is a valid VO introduced, the whole contract need to be redrafted again. See how problematic? So this is the rationale behind why there's a special clause under the PAM or JKR or CIDB or even FIDIC that this is a very important term. It doesn't vitiate the existing contract. So why need changes? These are the root cause of the changes. Okay. Employees requirement, design review, statutory change, product improvement, etc., countless. Okay. So who can initiate it? Traditional procurement is employer or the contract administrator. Okay. So these are the constraints in traditional contract, employer or the contract administrator were able to carry out the valid variation order or change request. Okay, so usually it will have financial aspect if it is a addition, and also you have a legal implication, because changes could be a source of contention between the parties if they are not handled properly, especially in terms of the quantity, the rates, and also the extension of time and so on. So this is a very hot area for possible contention. And also your finalized account cannot be completed timely because of all this disagreement. Okay, so remember, repeat, who to change, initiate the so-called the change or the VO in your PAM or JKR, FIDIC, CIDB. It will be the employer or the contract administrator. You cannot see the terms here. Subcontractors or main contractor trigger the change. Initiate, that means trigger the change. Who to initiate? These are the two persons under this. Okay, other person under the contract, you can't do it. Only these two. Okay, yeah. So why got contention? Because you're talking about payment and claim. If they are not done in an acceptable manner. And also on top of this, it's a very interesting thing under this principle. Why there's a lot of contention? Is due to this so-called principle under VO works. Under valid VO works. What does it mean here? Basic principle under valid VO works is that the contractor must proceed with the VO works, even though the rates or additional time requested may not be agreed. It means that the contractor must proceed the work even though the employer have not agreed to any of the rates or the quantity or even the time that you ask for, if it is a positive VO. So this is the hot topic for a hot area for dispute. This could be due to the basic principle that valid VO works is issued that the contractor must proceed with the VO work even though the rates additional time and blah 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 not yet even agreed. Work first, argue later. That is the principle here. It's in your PAM, it's in your FIDIC, it's in your CIDB, it's in your JKR contract. This principle is there under your traditional procurement. Okay, so these other things is important. Please remember this concept. So that's why I say it's a major contention. It's due to the above ground. Okay. So another area is this, that the contractor, a lot of the employer will think, This is another area of contention, that the contractor who is pricing wrongly or making error somewhere, making use of the variation to turn a loss-making project into a profitable one. So this is another ground for the reason why it is a hot topic or hot area for disharmony at the project site. Okay, so number one is work first, argue later. When everything not even agreed. And number two, this is the employer's mentality or the consultant's mentality that, oh, the contractor, once you got this so-called VO, will simply charge me so that to turn their loss-making project into a profitable one. This is something, another potential ground for the dispute in quantity, in rates, in time, and so on loss and expense that are incurred. So please remember there are two important points. One is on the contractor side, the other one is on the employer and the so-called consultant side that contribute to this problem at the project side. Okay. So please be careful on these two important basic concepts. So what is a variation? So I didn't refer to your PAM yet. So this variation is the common law basis or general concept basis. Okay, the essential elements for variation is this. There must be a change. And what is the change? It must be a so-called change related to the project. There must be a change. And the change must be related to the project. So if a consultant issue a change that is not related to the project, then that VO is an invalid VO. Okay, so this important point you need to remember. Change, it must be related to the project. I give one good example. If I asked to do a condominium, okay, so then somehow they come in with the architect instruction to add into the condominium to do something totally different. For example, for condominium, then they ask you to do a VO on this condominium project that is something very, very new. For example, asking you to construct a boat. Okay, one side your contract is a condominium to building for habitable building. On the other side, the VO is to build a boat. So to the contractor, I am a builder. I'm not not building boats. See, so this is something very new. Although there's a change, but it's something very new. It becomes an invalid one. So please understand the concept. The change must be relevant to the project. That is a valid change. Okay. Yeah, it must be in relation to the scope of work. That's what I'm trying to say just now. Okay. So it had to be expressly included in the contract document, the scope of work. So how to know that they belongs to the existing scope? It must be expressly included. The word is expressly. No such thing as imply in this case. Please understand the concept of express and imply. That means it will be shown in the BQ specification, drawing, and so on. Okay. But sometimes, if there are certain problem, this one the judge will come in, will be implied in the contract document. So this one is upon dispute. This one the judge may come in. But as long there is no dispute, this one will never come in. So this situation, only to the picture if both parties were to so-called the dispute in the courts. So this is important. Implied will only come in when there is a situation reaching the court, because the judge will do this implied action. Other people have no power to do that. I hope you must be very clear. These are today we take back a lot of principle. Okay, so I hope you understand and remember this principle, because this will be with you for your working life. I hope we are clear. So these are very important principle and concept, so that it will be very helpful when you work professionally. So these are the professional concept that will be with you for long time. Okay, so therefore, reference point will tell you whether it's going to be valid or invalid, and whether there is an implied situation. Remember, it is the court or the judge will tell you, no other people. It must be from this particular area. Okay. So generally, you find that departure from the contract is called a variation, not general concept, where laymen will think, but then there is a so-called valid and invalid. Okay, so please be careful. The validity and enforceability have to be looked into seriously. If you don't understand this concept, then a lot of the contract administrator will get in trouble. Okay, the validity and enforceability of the variation or changes come into play instead of mere generalization. So generalization is any change, then you have to look into it, is it valid or invalid. So it have to be a valid one. If invalid one, no need to follow. Okay. So in the absence of provision to the contrary, that means there are no other excluding clause. The rules laid down in this case will give you some guidance under the common law, not under the contract, under the common law. Okay, an item specially provided is not extra or variation. So if it's in your BQ already provided, you don't call that a variation. It's your normal work to be claimable under your normal rates and so on. Okay, so contractor supply material of higher quality than the necessary. If the contractor were to give something better in terms of quality, then it is a contractor's discretion to hire using the higher quality for the thing that is required under the contract. You won't get extra cost or payment for this variation. It's a contractor own initiative to provide something extra, because the contract provide the minimum. You provide something extra, is not a VO. Okay, point number 2. If contractor did not work or supply material, not called for by the contract, so you go and do something that is additional, it's not required. This one is the contractor's fault. You cannot classify that as a VO. So in short, VO are something that is required in the project in relation to the project so-called concept. Okay, if the project is, let's say, a factory, then your VO things must be related to the factory requirement. You don't ask for something different from the factory requirement. That's what I try to say. If anything done by the contractor to give better quality or something material not required, then it can be rejected by the consultants or the employer. The contractor have to redo the work at no additional cost and cannot even claim for extras for that type of so-called unilateral variation introduced. The keyword here is unilateral variation introduced, may not be accepted. If accepted, you don't be getting extra payment or extra time. Very important. Okay. And now the reasons for variation in general. Remember here in general. Okay. So employer are the main cause and the consultants under your traditional contract to create the variation? First of all, change in the employee's requirement after the project is awarded. Okay, so this is very true in many of the project. Then review by the designer. The consultants change the design. Okay, so this is the usual one. The documents produced having a lot of discrepancies or ambiguity. They need to be instructed again. Or negligent advice issued to the contractor. So interference in the contractor's way of doing things. So these are potential, as I say here, under the common law ground. But contractually, it could be different. Please remember that. Due to legislative change, yes, these are all valid one. Okay. Adverse environmental factors, yes, these are the change in commercial political factors. These are all usual valid. And then the miscellaneous reasons. Okay, so these are the potential areas where the variation can be triggered. So it's important. These are the common law ground. But I repeat, common law ground and your contractual ground may differ slightly. So sometimes the common law ground, these are the areas. But you look at the contractual ground, some of the areas already been negated from the contractual ground, or contractual ground got extra provision than the common law ground. So please remember that. These are the usual things that is happening at the project site. Okay. So what is the effect of the valid VO? Okay. So if it's a valid VO, then contractor must comply. Valid VO. So if the contractor refuses to comply, then it amounts to a breach of the contract, and the employer got a lot of rights to take against the contractor. Okay. So usually if the breach is not serious, then action to be taken by the employer could be this. Okay. Third party to carry out the work and then deduct the money from the contractor. Okay. So or the employer take up the work and then charge the additional cost to the contractor. So these are the options in common law sense. Okay. But what action to be taken under the contractual sense, you must understand your PAM. Okay. So your PAM may have slightly than this. So this is the common law principle or general principle. So common law is a second thing that if you don't challenge whatever in your contract, if you agree, that is your private matter. But if you go to challenge, these are the common law concepts that you need to look into. Your lawyer will advise you already, okay, on the common law way of doing things. It's different from your contractual. Contractual is in your PAM. So this, please be careful. These are the two areas, two categories of people that is advising you. Common law, the lawyers will come in. And then under your contractual, professional people will come in. Like the QS, the claim consultants, engineers, architect will come in. How about invalid variation? Okay, so invalid variation order, it can happen in the project. So then this will give rise to some complication. Okay, yeah. So for example, the most prevalent will be under the failure to comply on formalities. Okay, so for example, these are the happening. Okay, procedural substantive requirement sidestep out of ignorance or by purpose or by design. Okay, in terms of the claims and long outstanding dispute. So all these are happening to the disadvantage of the contractor. So it is further worsen. Exacerbate means further worsen by the unprofessional contract administrator. Okay, acting on their own or in collusion with the employer. Can you see these are the problems at the project site? If someone is acting in the unprofessional manner, it will give rise to a lot of problem on the invalid variation. Okay, so this is something that you must be careful. Okay, so therefore the court will come in to protect the contractor more often than the others, because usually the contractors are the one that is being bullied by the consultants and the employer. So the court will generally adopt a very strict approach on this matter by avoiding through various mechanisms to issue valid variation order, even in a situation where these are rightfully due. So the court will come to the equation to check out whether it's a valid or invalid. More often than not, they will try to protect the contractor more than the so-called consultants. Okay, so what would be the impact? So in order to minimize the uncertainty and the contentions, so these are the various categories of invalid variation. Okay, so number one is a legally that is invalid. Number two, procedurally invalid. For example, you need to give certain things within a certain time frame, then you don't comply with the procedures, so this will be the problem. And also, you not only the positive instruction, it will be on omission also. And then this is a very important concept, cardinal. So here it means the cardinal change. Cardinal change means that the VO is very different to the of the I already mentioned to you that asking the contractor to construct a boat is a totally cardinal change. It's a cardinal change. It is a invalid VO. So with that, we come and end here. We'll continue. Okay, so we'll continue with this one in our next lectures. So now let's go back to the meeting. Sorry. So now 181. So for those that you attend but cannot get it updated, please let me know. No? If not, then this will be the official one. Okay? Please let me know. I'm going to export it out already. Okay, I export it out already. I'll try to get the download here. Here usually not so accurate. I can show it to you. I prove to you. It's not so accurate. Okay, so this one is for lectures. Yeah. Okay, so these are not so accurate. So you can see from here, there you are. Once I do the cleaning up, data, you only show 120 something only. Definitely, don't cover all. So I cannot make use this one to support. So please be careful. Okay. So so this is an incomplete one. Okay. So thanks for coming and stay safe, and everyone.